This is where the confrontation with Simpson and Goldman started and ended.
Do you think he was innocent in fact?
He had nothing exculpatory. Everything pointed in one direction at this guy.
Nicole Brown Simpson absolutely was a battered woman.
OJ, please surrender immediately.
OJ!
Should the American people be furious at the defense for driving a railroad train through the racial divide in this country, for raising the specter of racist cops when it was obvious that O.J. Simpson had murdered his wife?
Here we are, 20 years later. The day I die, that will be the lead two sentences of my obituary.
The fact that he fell from the top of the world to the most hated person in the world, that's your story right there.
And good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for OJ20, June the 4th, 2014. This is KingJordan you're listening to. We're joined with several guests. Let's bring them in one by one. First of all, out of Phoenix, Arizona, please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dwayne Cates, defense attorney. Good evening, Dwayne, and welcome to KingJordan Radio. How are you?
Good, Jordan. How are you tonight?
Oh, very good. I believe we have Mr. Darren Kabanoki, a defense attorney, seen on HLN and the ID Network. Darren, good evening. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, Jordan?
Pleasure. We have the body language expert out of Florida, Miss Susan Constantine. Good evening, Susan, and welcome to KingJordan Radio. How are you?
Hey, Jordan.
Okay. Well, it's been 20 years of the O.J. Simpson acquittal. And Darren, I want to go to you first on this. When this trial started back in 95, a long time ago, did the defense win it, or did the prosecution lose it?
That's a great question. It's so funny to think about that trial and how long ago it was, because I was a brand new baby lawyer, and I started practicing in 1994. And I remember where I was on the slow speed chase. I remember where I was when the acquittal was announced. And it seems like for this generation, it's kind of the equivalent of, where were you when Kennedy was shot? But to answer your case, to answer your question, rather, in a word, in my view, this was less about a defense win and much more about a prosecution loss. And to put a really, really fine point on it, I was speaking with somebody in the makeup room at the CNN bureau in Los Angeles today, and I'll allow that person to remain nameless, but she's working on a CNN documentary about this very topic, and had just interviewed Alan Dershowitz, who was commenting quite emphatically that the defense team always felt like this was a lock for them based on all of the prosecution missteps, based on the mishandling, that they never felt like they had to mount a defense, that it was always about the prosecutor failing to meet its burden, failing to be effective, and I think ultimately that's one of the legacies of this case.
Jordan, can I chime in? Dwayne Cates.
Dwayne Cates, let's hear from you.
I somewhat agree, but I think that part of the brilliance of the defense case was that they forced the prosecution to go to trial very fast. Most of these cases take 2 or 3 years to get to trial, and the prosecution has plenty of time to get up to speed. You got to remember, this is when DNA was first coming out. Nobody had really even heard about it yet. The prosecution didn't have any idea, and the defense had Barry Scheck, who probably knew more about DNA than any lawyer in the country. And so they shoved them into trial I mean, they enforced the last day, and the prosecution wasn't ready for the onslaught, and the defense had the resources to hire a dream team of lawyers in every area, and they just overwhelmed the prosecution.
I think that is such a great point, Dwayne, that, and it's funny because I worked on a very high-profile case in L.A. after that. It was the murder of Bill Cosby's son, Ennis Cosby. And I was the first lawyer hired on that case, and we were initially retained to go through preliminary hearing, and borrowing a page from what had happened just shortly before that in the Simpson case, they skipped the preliminary hearing. They went straight to the grand jury, filed an indictment. It was a completely different tactical game that the DAs were playing, and all of that was influenced by what happened in O.J. Simpson. Dwayne, your point is so right on, because the defense never waived time. They insisted on a speedy preliminary hearing, and they scored a lot of points at that preliminary hearing, and they never waived their right to a speedy trial, and this case was on a fast track, and that made it advantage defense right from the gate.
Okay, let me hear from Susan, body language expert. Also, we do have legal analyst Richard Herman joining us. Good evening, Richard. How are you?
How are you, KingJordan?
Okay, you're on the phone with Darren Kavanoki, Dwayne Cates, the body language expert, Susan Constantine. Susan, can you take a shot at that question?
Okay, well, I'm going to speak not as a body language expert, but I'm going to speak as a jury consultant. Okay, so when I'm looking at this juror profile, if I were hired for this case, this was a dream team of jurors for the defense. When you're looking at the difference between egalitarians and authoritarian jurors, the demographics of this jury pool was a dream for those that were working for the defense. That's just the very beginning part of it. I cannot speak on the behalf of the legal aspect of it because that is not my line of expertise. My expertise really ranges from looking at the demographic profile of the jurors, seeking out who I think are the most dangerous jurors, and then working our best to get them excused off the case or strike them off of our jury pool. And then we've got what we've got left over. And hopefully, from the state point of view, I mean, you're looking at these demographic profiles. There's like one person that was even slightly authoritarian that was that I would consider anybody that would have had any sort of qualities to be able to lead that group there. I mean, everyone in here, most of them were people that are low-income earners or factory workers, computer technology people, and there was a high level of minorities. I think there was only one white woman that served on that jury pool. And when you listen, you read about some of their comments that they've made throughout the voir dire, you would be able to determine, which ones would be best for the defense and which are the prosecutions. I don't think that the state really used their preemptory strikes very well in dismissing some of these jurors that I felt were very dangerous for their case.
Okay, Richard, I asked the question, did the state lose it or did the defense win it? What's your take?
This was a state prosecutorial abomination from the get-go. From selecting the jurisdiction to rush and get a grand jury indictment rather than bringing the case in the jurisdiction where the crimes took place. What did they expect? They knew they were going to get a dominant minority jury bringing it in downtown L.A., and that's exactly what they got. But moreover, the thrust of the defense of the case showed the jury, now this comes on the heels of Rodney King's beating by the police within 2 years or so, showed the jury the blunders of the police, how they set things up, how they moved evidence, how they contaminated evidence. It wasn't a question of Barry Scheck being a brilliant DNA. All he had to say was they contaminated it. They contaminated O.J.'s blood. They may have spilled blood on the glove. I mean, it was just an abomination from every move they made, including having those two inept attorneys act as prosecutors who unbelievably are called on television shows to give legal analysis these days, which I can't believe.
Yeah, I think Marcia is actually one of the only real winners to come out of this because she got a $6 million book deal on the heels of that loss.
Can you believe that? I mean, it's unbelievable that happened to her. A complete and utter abomination as an attorney, completely over her head in this case, had no idea, had no way to handle the defense attorneys. The judge turned off early on in the case, so he was gone. He allowed the defense to run roughshod over them, to bring a discrimination theory of defense in this thing, and to show the jurors that, look, we know how it is, brothers and sisters. You can't trust law enforcement. Look what they did here. Look how we caught them. How can you have any confidence in the prosecution case now? How can they possibly convict our victim, O.J. Simpson? It had to go this way. It had to be an acquittal, a complete and utter devastation from the get-go from the prosecution.
And you know what was amazing about it? Living in L.A. at the time, this was the first case, at least that I can remember, where you really had lawyer as celebrity and judge as celebrity. And Judge Ito seemed to be really taken with the cameras in the courtroom and the international scrutiny in the case. I remember running the L.A. Marathon that year. And Judge Ito standing outside.
Hey, Dwayne, you ran that marathon, didn't you, Dwayne? Dwayne, you ran that.
Were you running with me in '95? And Judge Ito. Yeah, Judge Ito was out there like waving and just being part of the crowd, and he was a celebrity. And the Rolling Stones were on tour then. And one of their several last times their touring tours, and Robert Shapiro was in the crowd. Now I was in the crowd too, but Shapiro had much better seats, and they flashed up on the big screen. At the big screens of concerts, sometimes they have these crowd shots, and they had spotted Shapiro in the crowd, and all of a sudden his face goes up on the screen, and people erupted. It was like there was cheering, and this was before the verdict was in. This was people were very taken with him as a celebrity now, and it was the first time I could remember that happening, where lawyers and judges were so much part of the public consciousness. It was an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah, I witnessed something similar happen down here with the
with the
Jodi Arias case. I mean that was a circus.
Yep.
That really was.
150 million people watched the verdict in the O.J. Simpson case.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny that I remember. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go on.
I was going to say that everyone was watching it from all over the world, and it really was it was almost like a reality TV show. And I want to take you back. I was probably in my mid-20s when we were watching this trial, and of all things, that specific day, I was getting my hair done at the hairdressers, and everyone stopped. Customers, everyone else, rollers in their hair, foils in their hair, stopped, watched it, the entire chase down the road, and then of course, it was kind of reenacting that, and then there was the verdict. I mean, the whole place, it was like a comedy act. It was amazing. And it's interesting that you guys said that, you can think about, different points in times about our assassinations or these big high-profile trials, about you can remember exactly what day, what time, and what hour it happened, and remember it like as if it happened yesterday. And that had the same impact on me as it did others on the O.J. Simpson case.
Yep.
And it was funny because that was my first time ever being a legal commentator, and I was in law school, and reporters came to our law school to ask us what we thought about the O.J. Simpson trial. So that was my very first time ever being on TV.
That's what most of the TV stations do now. They get law students to act as sophisticated legal commentators, and most of these students have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, never been in a courtroom, and, we got to sit and listen to that garbage. But anyway, I'm sure you were brilliant back in law school.
I was brilliant. I absolutely
I know you were.
Yeah, by the time I got to law school, I had been in several courtrooms, but it was always as the defendant. That was my problem.
Yeah, I was going to say that we can't count my perp walks other than being on TV.
You put your lead detective, I was going to say defective, Mark Furman on the stand, and you catch your lead guy basically planting evidence and in just outright blatant lies, and you look to the jury, and, you know, defense guys know this, you look to the jury and say, their own lead detective set this case up. He lied. You caught him in a lie. Doesn't that taint everything in the prosecution case? And it just went down the line. This Mark Furman is called by Fox to be an expert on things. He is an expert on blowing cases and obstructing justice. Why was he not indicted? Why was he not arrested? It's unbelievable to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Your thoughts on Mark Furman, Dwayne?
You know, Mark Furman, you know, he was a defense dream. You know, I mean, he couldn't keep his story straight. God, you know, it was just his cross-examination was, you know, should be shown to law students, you know, when he was cross-examined, because he was just disassembled.
Yeah.
Karen,
I think that was the last.
Mr. Furman.
Oh yeah, I mean, Furman was massacred, but I also felt like the defense was so lucky. Like at the time that they asked him the question about ever having used the N-word, they didn't have those tapes, and sometimes it just goes to show better lucky than good.
Well, that was just that was I mean, that's when the entire case swung, and it was probably irretrievable at that time based on that evidence. But when you have an inexperienced prosecutor like Darden, who's up there, you know, in an arrogant and just a horrible attitude during the proceeding, and you have him go with this glove issue, and you tell him to OJ to put the glove on, not knowing anything about this glove, knowing whether it can fit. It was so amateur hour, and boy, you know, they tell you don't ask a question you don't know the answer to, and of course we always ask questions we don't know the answers to, but we take calculated risks. This was an absolute abominable blunder that was just devastating to the prosecution case when he wiggled and jiggled and tried to get his hand and it didn't fit.
And actually got to testify and say in front of the jury it doesn't fit, and was never cross-examined.
Exactly.
I mean, that was one of the big blunders.
Look what they're doing to me. I'm a victim. Look what they're doing to me. It doesn't fit, you know.
And I actually got to use, if the glove doesn't fit, you must quit.
Used it.
I got to use that in front of a jury. It was absolutely wonderful.
It's so amazing, though, that people think that it was Johnny Cochran that came up with that phrase. And apparently, somebody else on the defense team surfaced that from a poem that had been written. And it wasn't original thought on Johnny's part, but I think if you asked 100 people on the street where that phrase came from, Johnny Cochran would get the credit. And when we talk about the winners and losers from the O.J. Simpson case, Johnny Cochran, one of the big winners. I think we could probably all agree on that.
Absolutely. Johnny Cochran was awesome in that trial. I mean, he really was, and you know, he was masterful.
He was masterful.
And
He made it to OJ. Yeah, he made it to OJ being the victim, and he brought race into it, and he plastered it in the jury's minds at the end. And send a message, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, send a message to the Los Angeles Police Department that you will not tolerate this type of horrendous police work. That was his summation, and it was devastating.
Well, and Susan's point, I think, is so important because, as you know, as lawyers or people practicing in court, that you can have the best case in the world, but if you don't have an audience that's receptive to hearing it, you're screwed from the gate. And what they did so masterfully, or what the prosecution did so poorly in even their choice of venue, was that there were a bunch of people, 12 of them to be precise, who were completely open to what Johnny Cochran was saying that day.
Right. Well, you know, that's a very good point because, you know, I train attorneys all over the country. I have certified courses that are state bar certified in 35 states in detecting deception and communication. And the one thing that I teach attorneys, and, you know, you guys probably have already mastered this, but, you know, one thing that I really admired a lot about this particular case is that with Cochran is that he had this really strong visual appearance. He was a charismatic leader. He was a phenomenal speaker and presenter, and he utilized the 4 secrets to communication, which means connecting people visually, auditorily, kinesthetically, and also using facts, which is called auditory digitally. And using those components, and one of the things I like to make a point to is that, you know, 61% of our general population, which are jurors, are visual. And everything that he expressed, he walked them through down memory lane as if they were there, as if it was in living color. He used the correct tonality. He knew when to pause and to hesitate and create silence when he needed to really anchor a message. His presentation from a public speaker's point of view, he was exceptional. And I think that in itself, the way he was able to connect with that jury, they're already a defense-minded jury, okay? They're already predisposed to being more defense than they were prosecution. The charisma that he possessed just captivated people. I mean, it was just one of those things you just want to listen to him, because it was like listening to Martin Luther King or something speak, because he was able to really rivet right through the soul of people just through his voice inflection, his tonality, his and connecting with people visually.
And
I think that was
authenticity.
so powerful. Authenticity. You're right. He was very authentic. You could tell that it was coming from that authentic passion that he had within himself. He believed in what he was saying, and that really projected when he was speaking.
Richard, what about Judge Ito? What's your thoughts on him?
Pathetic. One word, pathetic. I mean, I don't know how he got to be a judge. I don't know why he got to be a judge. I don't know what his qualifications were. He certainly, I don't know that he's even a lawyer. I'd like to see his law degree. I mean, he was just horrible. And he allowed the attorneys to run all over him, no control of the courtroom, him and his stupid hourglasses up there. I mean, it was ridiculous. But back to Johnny Cochran, there's very few defense attorneys that have the skill that he has. He was mesmerizing. It was like a Sunday sermon, and the jury bought into every word out of his mouth. And he's very charismatic and a bright guy. And you're right. And I've read your book, Susan. He did everything you want an attorney to do, and they just fell in love with him. And if he would have said anything that day, the jury would have bought it. They just loved him. They believed he was authentic, and they believed his story that the police went after to frame their brother, OJ. And I think there were 8 or 9 blacks on that jury. There's no way there was going to be a conviction in this case.
No.
And, talking about Ito, I think Ito was a little overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
Not by just the cameras, but I think that just the magnitude of the lawyers on the defense side. I mean, I think he was in awe of the defense team. I mean, I think he just sat there in awe about what was going on, and I think he let the defense team just run roughshod over his courtroom. I mean, they basically got to do anything they wanted to do. They got to do, and and it was pretty clear.
I mean, F. Lee Bailey. The judge probably had posters of him in his room. I mean, this was considered at one time the greatest defense attorney. One of the greatest in the world. And there he was, hammering Furman, dissecting him, demolishing him in front of this jury. I mean, it was just masterful.
Yeah. Okay, what I was going to share with you is regarding Furman. I think that, his arrogance and his narcissism was just, it reeked the courtroom. And first of all, you've got people in L.A., number one, that they want to trust cops, but as much as they want to trust cops, they don't trust cops at the same time. So when he was caught, actually almost impeached on the witness stand, that his arrogance, his lack of emotion and empathy and compassion, none of that was there. He came across as being so deceptive. I mean, when you're talking about things that don't match, what he was saying wasn't matching with the words, and the scene wasn't matching with what he was constantly contradicting himself. And regardless of these people that were on the jury, they weren't the most highly educated people, but they could, I'll tell you what they are, they're street smart. And, and they listened to him, they knew he was full of crap. And I said that he lost his credibility, and no one trusted him. And I think
he broke into the house. He broke into the house without a warrant. He planted evidence.
I know it.
I mean,
it was a huge mistake. I don't know why the state would have called him as a witness. I really don't know. I guess the defense would have called him as a witness anyway. They probably had to. But, I mean, I think that he destroyed the case. It was almost kind of like when you look at the Trayvon Martin case. Remember Gentile and how when she testified, how horrible she was? God bless her soul. But we're looking at the same train wreck when we're looking at Furman. I think that he did a huge disservice for the state.
I don't know if anybody thought about this, but, it would have been a whole different case if that case were today with the new technologies that we have, that with touch DNA and with all the new CSI gadgets that they have and all the crime scene investigation techniques that they have nowadays, it would be a totally different case.
Horatio Cain would have got a conviction, right?
Yeah.
Aaron, I want to thank you. I know you have to run.
I've got an office full of people, but so great to talk to you guys. It feels like an HLN homecoming when I get to hang out with this crew. And thanks for having me, King. I hope we'll be back in touch soon.
Absolutely. Have a good one, Darren. Thanks.
All right. Take care, gang.
Bye.
See you, Darren.
Bye-bye.
All right. Another interesting character in the case was Kelvin Cato. Richard, let's start with you.
Well, he was a joke. I mean, the guy was just, a train wreck. You drive down the highway and you see a car crash, and everybody has to slow down and look at it. And this Cato Kalin was just a car wreck. And I remember watching him and listening to him and just his mannerisms. And sometimes I couldn't even understand the substance of what he was saying, but I couldn't take my eyes off this guy. It just kept coming every time they put him up there. And he was a big player in the case there. And they say he was until Marsha Clark went through that transformation and changed her hair, and then all of a sudden people were talking about her looks and not Cato Kalin anymore. But it was unbelievable.
Cato Kalin is probably the first person ever to be really, really, really famous for just being a freeloader. Because he was just living there for free, really wasn't doing nothing, and nobody can really explain why he was there or what he was doing there, or what kind of it was even nothing. And he just shows up and he's like, "Hey dudes, what's up, man?" He's like Spicoli.
With the pizza.
Yeah, with the ordered pizza in glass.
It's so funny. I have to share something with you, is that Cato Kalin's, his testimony I use in every single one of my training classes. And what I do is there's a part in his testimony talking about this book, this book deal that he was supposedly supposed to get. And, just watching his demeanor, and what I do is I kind of run it in real time. And he had the strongest sense of disgust and disdain for Marsha Clark. And you could see this in these little micro expressions of disgust, where the nose kind of crinkles up, and then he gets angry, and you could see him getting frustrated with Marsha Clark. But then what I do is when I show it in slow time or fast time, then I show the video in slow time, showing individuals that are taking my class of how you tie content of what he's saying, what he's hearing, with the expression that happens simultaneously. And when people see it in slow motion, they are shocked to seeing this strong disdain and disgust for Marsha Clark. But in every training class and people are just laughing. They laugh their butts off because they can't believe, oh my God, this guy is incredible. But you're right, shoulder shrugging, deception, he's pausing, and then he says, no, I'm not planning on writing a book, and his voice lowers, and it's like it's a secret. We know it's a secret because we already know that there's a book deal. We already know. He was not even a good liar. He just was horrible. And, it was comical. In fact, everybody, as I shared with you, everybody always laughs when I show that video. Slow time and then fast time. It's a classic for deception detection experts.
Richard, Alan Dershowitz, what's your take on him?
Well, Alan is, one of the greatest attorneys. I'm not even going to say defense attorneys. One of the greatest attorneys in our country. He's brilliant. His grasp of legal issues and the law is second to none. And when Alan speaks, you have to stop and listen to what he has to say, because more times than not, he's right on the button there. He's got tremendous analysis, and you talk about a dream team. Look at the attorneys that they had on the defense here. How could Marsha Clark and Darden ever, and Garcetti, how could they ever stand a chance again? I don't even care what the fact pattern was with that group of people, with Barry Scheck in the mix too. It was so stacked and loaded with just superior legal talent on the other side that, I'd venture to say that, any case that came before them, they probably could have won against the two prosecutors, because they were just so inept Marcia Clark was horrendous. I mean, she was horrible in her questioning and her demeanor and her strategy. And Darden was just like a kid out of law school. I mean, I don't even know really how did he get the second seat in the biggest murder trial in maybe in the country, in the history of L.A. Certainly. What is he doing there? It's just. And they got it handed to them. They really did. They got what they deserved by putting on a case like that. And believe me, everybody felt O.J. was guilty. There was the evidence seemed to be overwhelming against his guilt. And he took the civil case with a different burden of proof in Florida, and of course they crushed him. And then the big payback was in Las Vegas, and Vegas is just on a case that he should have won. He should have won the case in Las Vegas, and yet he didn't. They're never going to give him any leniency out here. He filed another appeal today in honor of your show, King. He put another appeal in on his case in Vegas, but they're not going to let him go, and he's got no chance on appeal. And it's just, he should have been convicted in California, and I think Vegas has taken their vengeance out on him now.
Yeah, I have people all the time, my clients all the time go, hey, O.J. Simpson got off, and I said, well, okay, give me $28 million. I'll go put together a dream team. Alan Dershowitz can write motions and argue motions for me any day of the week.
Absolutely.
And I'll have Barry Scheck run the DNA guy. I'll have Johnny Cochran open and close for me. Come on, I won't do anything. I'll just sit in the chair. I'll just be like a conductor because they got the best lawyer in every area, in every field that they got F. Lee Bailey to do the cross-examination. Come on. I mean, it just doesn't get better than what they did. And,
they would have put you in there, Dwayne. You would have been part of the team too.
I don't know. I would have been happy to watch. I'd have been happy just to be sitting at the table.
And Dershowitz said that the glove thing didn't have to be in the presence of the jury. That could have been tried outside the presence of the jury, he told Geraldo. So that wasn't a good idea.
Well, number one, the prosecution should have made him try to put the glove on long before trial. I mean, that should have been something that was done way before they even impaneled a jury. She should have tried the glove on
with a video camera to see if it fit them.
Absolutely.
But they planted the glove, so now they got payback for planting the glove. I mean, and tainting it with his blood. The CSI in L.A. said we dropped the vial. Some of his blood spilled, and the glove was on the desk when it spilled. I mean, that's what happened here. You can't make this stuff
the lesson is if you're gonna plant a glove, buy one that's the right size.
Or a little big.
Yeah, a little big, because it might dry up and shrink up a little bit. You're absolutely right. Just make sure the glove fits.
But Susan, what do you do when you have a jury pool so stacked pro-defense that, what are you going to do? I mean, you're stuck with it. You can try to weed out the jurors, and I have this dilemma all the time. And believe me, I'm a believer. In all my trials, I bring in jury consultants, and I'm going to have to bring you in next time, but I believe in that. I really do. But sometimes you get a jury pool, and you're stuck. I mean, you're really jammed up.
You are stuck. And I've had that happen to me. I've done several jury trials, and, I walk in there, and it's interesting because it's just a crapshoot. You guys know this. It just depends on who shows up that day, and it's like throwing dice because you never know who's going to show up, and it may be the first 30 or 40 that show up. They're strong authoritarians or egalitarians, and it's like playing a game of chess to try to get the ones off that you want and keep the ones that you keep. It's really a strategic game. But what do? Here's what you do: it really is all about, and you guys know this, is about building rapport. It's about building rapport with that jury. The second thing is being able to dummy down when you're speaking to them so that you can connect with people. The way I liken this to is it's like the President of the United States, of any president. They have to be able to speak in a way that connects with every kind of learning and communication style. And when you get to that point, you become more of a master communicator, and you hope that the other side is going to be worse. And so your only advantage that you have is you and how you connect with that jury and how you deliver that information to connect with them so that they will be convinced and what you're telling them is the truth on either side. And so it really depends on your skillfulness and your persuasion techniques, your persuasion, your communication skills, your speaking skills to connect with that jury. That's going to be your strength.
Yeah, Maricopa County has got notoriously conservative jurors. I mean, we have tough juries in Maricopa County. They're all, from the Midwest. They're all retired. They're all, they're all. I mean, it's
guilty
brutal
till
here.
proven innocent. Guilty till proven innocent.
I just tried a case that was on Dateline NBC in January. It was the best case that I've ever had, second-degree murder case. I tried the best case that I ever had. It was my best effort. My client was a lawyer, and all his friends were lawyers, and his friends watched the trial, and they were good trial lawyers that watched the trial, and they all were like, "Oh my God, that was awesome!" And I felt like I won every witness, I won everything, and the jury came back guilty, and it was so bad that the judge threw the verdict out based on weight of the evidence, which never happened. Wow. The judge said, I can't let this stand. This was just, and the judge did a 31-page, ruling that said,
lucky.
It never happens. That never happens.
Yeah.
And
I had a good judge.
When you look at the jury pool,
go ahead, Susan.
Go ahead.
Go on. No, I'm going to change.
I'm going to change the subject here. But anyway, when we're looking at the dynamics of the jury, it's not looking at them as individuals. It's looking at them as a group, the group dynamics behind closed doors, right? So in that case, in that case where you lost the case when you think everything was going right, you guys know that it just takes one or two to change the majority effect. So, there's probably nothing you could have done because someone in there was a stronger leader and everyone was convinced by them that person was easy and was able to sway other people over.
And that's exactly what happened.
Zimmerman trial was the same thing. Remember? I mean, we were all there. I'm here in Orlando, Florida. I thought for sure that we would have gotten at least something. He would have been convicted of something because, the jury kept going back and forth. I said, you know what? These guys are wavering. You're wavering, and somebody's a holdout. And all it takes is one or two holdouts, one to convince the other just enough to sway them over. So when you're looking at a jury, think about who's going to be not so much the strongest one, the most influential. And who are the swayers, the ones easily manipulated?
The Zimmerman case had to go that way because there was no evidence to support any other verdict other than what the jury came in with. And that case also, the prosecution was horrible. But one other thing here, King, and by the way, I just saw Zimmer just died, the former coach of the Yankees, and the Red Sox just passed away. But that's sad.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, let me just say that it took them 6 months to put on the prosecution case against OJ. And they didn't need 6 months, and that's another reason they lost the case. They should have streamlined it and gone after it. But to bring on this case for 6 months, so much bad can happen during those 6 months.
And
Jordan, Jordan, we really don't need you. You can go now. We'll take care of this, okay?
Sure. I'm having a great time listening.
Jurors get numb after a while. It's like if they look at a graphic photo, if they're looking at it over and over and over again, at some point in time, it just becomes nothing. And they're only going to retain maybe 25% at best information. So, 6 months, these guys checked out probably a long time ago. At that point in time, they had already, when you're looking at someone, like in the Casey Anthony trial, when you have jurors that are looking at that defendant day in and day out, there tends to be that connectiveness, and the longer it goes, it's like, to me, it's most dangerous for
that didn't help Casey. That connectiveness did not help her.
Well, it did help her. It did help her there, but there was that connectiveness Oh no, what I'm saying is that when the O.J. Simpson case, they connected with him, looking at him every single day, connecting with him.
Plus, O.J. was a star too.
That's the thing.
Yes,
there you go, Dwayne.
Sure.
He was a superstar in the African American community, sort of like Pistorius is in South Africa. I mean, he is also elevated like to the level of O.J. as being a cult figure, almost a hero, and that's what O.J. was, especially to the black community. So when they were able to show how the police work was shoddy and that evidence was planted, that fed right in.
And they got to sit 15 feet away from their hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
20 feet away from their hero.
Absolutely.
For 6 months, and that and then you add that connection. I mean, it was a cocktail for a loss for the prosecution, kind of right from the beginning.
Yeah, I agree.
Richard, the second case, 207. What would a normal person have got in that case in Las Vegas we were just talking about? What would be a normal
with O.J.?
Yeah.
9 to 33
he got.
Yeah, probably a year or two, and I've talked to defense attorneys out here who have said that. I mean, they really just look. I tried a case back there, Susan, in Orlando, a 11-month federal RICO case, insurance fraud case, where they stacked on a federal defendant. Thank God, not my client, and he ended up getting 845 years because the judge stacked it on him. So here, in Vegas, a normal defendant would have come through in a case like this, maybe a year or two, max 3.
Yeah, there would have been a plea bargain. You'd have plea bargained it out. You'd have got him a couple years.
Absolutely.
Time. Year with time for time served and good
this
behavior.
Judge hated him. Judge Glass hated him in Vegas. I mean, everybody hated him here, and this was the big payback. I mean, no matter what happened, they were going to get him.
Wow.
Yeah, and they'll never convince the Court of Appeals of that.
No. So
what about 2017? He's up for parole in 2017. So you think he'll get out?
No.
Hey,
anybody?
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. He's staying for a little longer, I think.
Yeah, he's going to stay in Vegas because something happened in Vegas. Okay. Yeah, I like
that. Richard, what's some of the evidence in the 94-95 case that if you were the prosecution, you would have focused more on than Marsha Clark and Darden didn't do? In retrospect,
the first thing, there's just so much, and you really would have had to work with law enforcement to get the story straight, so you weren't caught with your pants down as many times as they were, and you're dealt a hand of horrible police work there, so you've got to deal with that. But I certainly would have put into evidence the chase, the Bronco chase, because that's evidence of flight, that's evidence of guilt. They never put that before the jury. And there we were, mesmerized, watching this TV with this guy driving around like a mental case, and when he pulls into Rockingham, there's 27 SWAT people there with guns drawn on them, and why was that evidence not put in before this jury? I don't know. But other than, there were just so many problems with the prosecution, and I would have tried to get the judge on my side, and I would have tried to make legal arguments, and I would have made motions during the trial to try to get the judge focused, and I just would have done anything I could to keep things focused because it got out of focus. And the issue became a white-black thing, a racial issue in this trial, which was not the issue in the case. And it just everything got taken away from the mainstream. And I would have done everything I could in my power to try to keep the jury focused on the issues.
Dwayne, what about you? How would you have done this differently?
Absolutely. I mean, again, it's like I said before. They got overwhelmed by the defense. The defense forced them into trying this within the speedy trial rules with no continuances, just bam, 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 and the prosecution was so far behind by the time they realized that they were behind that they had no way to come back. They needed to throw a bunch more resources at this. I don't know if they had a room full of lawyers doing research, writing motions or something, but they should have they needed help. I mean, they really did. And I don't know if they're good attorneys or bad attorneys. They didn't do a very good job in the courtroom, but I think they were just absolutely overwhelmed. And it's one of those deals. Sometimes they were so far behind they may not even have known they were behind.
Yes, and of course, Mark Furman. Did he not realize, Richard, that he said the word nigger 10 years before? Did he just forget that? I mean,
Tom Wolfe wrote Vanity of the Bonfire of the Vanities. These people, they just get a perception of themselves that they're masters of the universe. They could do anything they want, and just disregarded any history he had. I mean, he broke into the house. He planted evidence. He was a horrible witness. They made a mistake by putting him on the stand. I think the defense might have been able to bring him up, maybe not, but that would have been a fight before the court there. They could have claimed inevitable discovery without putting Furman on the stand, but in any event, he was horrible, and he was the lead investigator, lead detective for this prosecution case, and when he goes bad, Jordan, how does the whole case not go bad? And he was bad. He was a horrible witness, and not only that, he obstructed justice. And believe me, if Dwayne, if your clients or my clients obstructed justice, they get another count tacked on. They're looking at 5 more years in prison. I mean, it's taken very seriously if a defense or someone on the defense side does this. But when the government witness does it, or a prosecutor or an FBI agent does it, it's a slap on the wrist or it's nothing. It's
nothing. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean,
all the time.
Prosecutors, I mean, I've caught them in just bald-faced lies in court to the judge and put it in motions, and the judge goes, well, it wasn't prejudicial. I go, I don't give a shit if it was prejudicial. He lied. You can't do that.
Right.
I don't care. I don't care what the effect was. Okay, the problem is that the man stood in your courtroom and lied to you. And the judge goes, it's no big deal. But you let your client do that, and oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Susan, what do you get out of O.J. Simpson when you see him talk, or those interviews that he posted from your body language expertise?
Well, when people ask me to analyze something, it's usually a specific moment in time. I tie everything into what's being spoken at that time, what he's saying, and tying it in with his facial expression. So, for me to give you kind of a generality, he had floods of emotion during different moments. But, one thing that I remember so distinctly, and I think it was in one of his depositions, and he was given a photograph of his Bruno Magli shoes. Remember that?
Yeah.
And so he had
I bought a pair of those. I bought a pair of those. I told everybody I had killer shoes.
Oh,
that's great.
That's pretty good.
A little Midwest humor, huh?
No, and smart. You're funny too. But, he's looking at this picture, and he's trying to conceal what he's really feeling, right? So. But he is, all of a sudden, this anger just kind of stems up, and you can see it because his mouth gets really tight, his lips pull in, his mouth goes horizontal, and the fear in his eyes, you can literally see the whites around the entire circle of his eyes when he's looking at those shoes, because he did not expect that they would have tied those shoes with him, that those were his Bruno Magli shoes, and those shoes were, I guess, the prints that were found, or I don't really know, but I know there was a connection with it. But anyway, in that demeanor there, he conceals a lot of his emotions, but it's like a teapot. You can only conceal them for so much, it's going to leak out somewhere. And it was leaking out, and the anger in his mouth, and it was leaking out, and the fear in his eyes. And when he was looking at that photograph, if he wasn't concerned about, why would he show fear and anger? These are the things that we're looking for, when looking for inconsistencies. The proper expression would be a neutral expression, not one of fear and anger.
Let me introduce a former LAPD sergeant, Mr. Kerry Anderson joins the program. Good evening, Kerry, and welcome to KingJordan Radio. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I apologize. I tried to call earlier, but I couldn't get through. And I haven't been privy to the actual interview. I had an emergency come up, but I'm here now.
Okay, yes. You've spoken mostly about OJ, and tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I worked with the Los Angeles Police Department for right at 20 years, and I had some pretty coveted assignments within those 20 years. I worked during the actual time when the O.J. Simpson incident, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman incident went down, and I was assigned to Chief Williams' security detail at the time. So I was privy to a little bit more information than the regular officers would be privy to. And
right.
That's just about it. Like I said, I don't know where you guys are in the conversations because I just got in dealing with this unforeseen occurrence. But anyway, if you have any questions, I'll feel free to, let you know what I know.
You have some insight. What's your take on the whole O.J. Simpson case, the verdict, everything?
Well, it was kind of very tragic for the families, obviously, that were involved. I think there was, my personal opinion, as it relates to O.J. Simpson being at the crime scene, I felt that he was there based on the evidence that we collected. However, I firmly believe that some of the evidence in the crime scene was definitely compromised by some of the individuals that were involved, and therefore it just didn't make the crime scene as well as it could be. We're taught to collect the evidence, preserve it, and do it without any kind of prejudice or anything like that. You just collect it and preserve it as you've been trained and taught, and evidence will speak for itself. However, when you do anything contrary to that, then there's an issue that could come up later. And obviously the jury was privy to certain things, and it definitely created some reasonable doubt. And therefore, that's why I think we got the verdict that was rendered.
Richard?
Well, we talked about that before, and this was about the worst police work you could probably anticipate or observe in any criminal proceeding. To see what happened in L.A. in this case, they were like morons running around there, who had no knowledge and no skill how to preserve evidence. I mean, they put a blanket over Nicole immediately when they got there, so that people couldn't look at her. But they corrupted her body. They corrupted the crime scene. They spilled blood evidence in the laboratory. They did not properly seal evidence. They did not take evidence properly. They didn't take it expeditiously. They didn't take it the day they went there. Some instances they waited a week to take down blood evidence and other types of evidence. I mean, this was perfect for a Barry Scheck to get up there and expose how inept the law enforcement was in obtaining any sort of forensic evidence in the case, and couple that with the mastery of Cochran and the lunacy of Mark Furman on the stand, and then couple that with the ineptness of a Marcia Clark and the abominable lawyering of Chris Darden, and a jury of basically worshipers of O.J. Simpson who were mesmerized by Johnny Cochran, and a judge who was asleep the whole trial. This is the result you get.
That's a nice summary, Richard.
That was really good. Yeah, it was.
Well, I don't know. I don't agree with some of those character traits that you talked about. Some of them are.
Don't you agree with? Because I'm prepared to defend every single one of them. So you tell me what you don't agree with.
Well, I don't think Marcia Clark was inept. I don't think Chris Darden was inept. I think they did make some. Hold on. I think they did make some mistakes. However, the other things that you did
OJ,
mention,
put the glove on, OJ. Try the glove on in front of the jury, OJ.
Okay, that was a mistake. That was a mistake.
The case. That was the case.
No, that wasn't the case.
That was the case. Yes,
no, that was not the case. That was not the entire case. I think you are...
Mark Furman was the case. Him and the glove, that was the case. No chance.
Those were very crucial, pieces of the case. But I still don't think that you paint a broad brush of ineptness on Marcia Clark's
absolutely.
Place.
Horrible attorney.
No.
Inept.
No.
Not qualified to try that case. Not qualified to try that case.
Really? Well, everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm sure that once the district attorney, who was in charge at the time, he put his best team forward, because he knew that O.J. was going to have his best team. And I don't know. And then you know, you talk about, you also mentioned about the jury being in awe of O.J. Simpson, which they may have been, but the bottom line is what people don't understand, and they criticize the jury as being dumb and ignorant. You know what? A blind person could have been seated on that jury, and that evidence been presented as it was presented, they would have come up with the same thing. I don't care if the jury was all white, all blue. It doesn't matter what the ethnic background of that jury was. Now, did it play a part? Absolutely, it did. But
you think O.J. didn't do it? You think he was innocent? You think he didn't do it?
No, I don't think that. And I tell you what, I know a lot more than you know. I don't think he did it. Absolutely, I do. I think he was there. You're absolutely right.
Why was he taking that joyride in the Bronco? What was that all about?
Why are you questioning me? I mean, what are you getting at? What you asked me? Did I think he did it? And I think he was there. I don't know if he did it. I think he was at that crime scene. I honestly believe that. I also think that blood, his blood there that was collected, was not planted there. I don't believe that, based on what I know. And I guarantee you, I know a lot more than you know. Okay?
Well, what do you know? Because I think it's planted. I think a lot of the whole prosecution case was planted. I think Mark Furman planted about 80% of the whole case.
Well,
why wasn't Mark Furman arrested?
Why
wasn't he arrested for obstruction of justice? Tell me why.
I think he should have been. I know Mark Furman personally. I can't stand him.
Why didn't you arrest him then, huh? Come on.
Why didn't I arrest him? It wasn't my duty to arrest him.
I understand.
Yeah, the LA County sheriffs were in charge of that at the time. It's not my duty as a police officer sitting in Parker Center on the 6th floor to arrest Mark Furman when he perjured himself on the stand.
Right.
That's just like saying, why didn't you arrest him?
I'm from New York. If I was out there, I would have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay. Well, like I said, I have my opinions about it. I'm not basing mine on conjecture and rumor. I know a lot more information than a lot of other people know, and I just think with all the factors that were involved and what was presented to that jury, it was they had to decide, they had to come back with that verdict if they had followed the law. And I don't think Judge Lance Ito was an idiot. I don't think that. I don't. You know, there's all kind of variables that caused this verdict to go down like it did. You know, and I think a lot of them had culpability. I don't think it was one set thing. A lot of people say, "Oh, it was a glove. It was Marcia Clark." No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. You take the glove out of the whole thing. What about the socks placed at the bed? Okay, that had
planted evidence.
You're absolutely right, 100%. That's the only thing that I really agree with you on. That now the thing is about if you planted, if that evidence was compromised, you can throw all of the evidence out.
Why do you got to plant evidence? How bad is your case that you got to plant evidence? Tell me.
I don't know. I don't. I've never planted evidence in my life. I worked those streets for over 20 years. And I don't have that kind of issue. But unfortunately, you do have that. You had that issue then, and you got it now to this day. I don't know. I don't have all the answers.
I have that issue in state cases. I have it in federal cases. People can't believe the FBI would do that. I've seen it, and yet it goes untouched, and none of them get prosecuted, and none of them get called out for obstruction. And if a defense person does that, believe me, they're charged, and they're superseders, and they're facing that. But if a government witness does that, or a prosecution witness does that, it's okay. No problem.
Well, I don't.
But that's what our job is, though. Our job is to to ferret that out. And you know, people ask me about being a criminal defense attorney. I tell them my job is to watch the cops. My job is to make sure that the cops don't run amok. My job is to make sure they don't kick your door down in the middle of the night and just come take you because they think you're guilty of something. You know, that's what I do. You know, that's what we do as criminal defense attorneys. You know, we watch the police. And you know, I know some really good cops and I know some really bad cops. And I tell them when I interview them, I said, listen, you know, if you do your job right and you do everything correctly, you know, you got nothing to fear from me. I go, but if you're, you know, but if you're cutting corners and cheating and planting evidence, then you got plenty to fear from me, and I'm going to find out about it. But that's what we do. That's our job.
And thank God for you. I can't stand bad cops, and I think They should be held to a higher standard. You know, they've been entrusted with the ability to take somebody's freedom away, and they should be held to a higher standard. And you know, it's unfortunate. We live in an imperfect world, and they, like I said, they obviously had it then, and they still have it to this day. All you got to do is look at the news, you know?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thank God that the juries nowadays are starting to realize, you know, more and more that this stuff happens. Because it used to be juries, and I don't know if you agree with me, Richard, but it used to be juries kind of just automatically believed cops. But
oh my
it
God.
doesn't have, but not anymore.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You know, when I testified in 1982 and 83, it was a wrap. When we took the stand, and you were basically guilty because everybody took our word for it. That is not the case now. That is totally not the case. And I'm speaking as a cop, well, former cop, you know. So it's unfortunate what has happened, but that's what happens when you just do bad things, and it shouldn't have happened. I believe that had that evidence been correctly obtained and not been compromised, and people not put their personal prejudices and everything in it, that guy would have been convicted, hands down. I don't care if the jury was all black. It didn't matter. If they followed the jury instructions, if that evidence had been, like I say, presented right and it been collected and preserved.
That's a big IF, capital I-N-F. If.
Yeah, and you're right, sir. I don't disagree with you there. I'm not, I'm not trying to blame fault or anything. I'm just saying I don't believe, though, that Judge Lancito, it was all his fault. It was all Marshall.
It was all his fault. I say he contributed to it because he was horrendous.
Well, I understand.
Let me just say.
I think everybody has some culpability.
Let me just thank you for your service, for your service and your dedication to law enforcement. That's appreciated. And Susan, your books are phenomenal. I have them, and I love to talk with you one of these days. And Dwayne, you've been doing a wonderful job on TV. I want you to know, especially on Jodi Arias. I loved watching your analysis and refreshing.
Yeah.
And the King.
At the end, I was the only one. At the end, I was the only one arguing for the defense.
Yeah, well, you did great. And King, once again, you tell Joey Jackson he missed the best show you've ever done today. So you tell him that.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. And Kerry, just one last thing. What do you think about OJ getting all this time to the case in Nevada?
Well, I just happened to be a Christian, and I think you're going to reap what you sow. I think he skated on the first one, and he was not humble, and it didn't matter if he was humble, because I firmly believe that he was guilty. I believe he had something to do with those homicides, and he got away with it because of the ineptness on LAPD's part, period. And I think it just ran downhill when you involved the DA and there was a lot of culpability in it, but it started with the collection and preservation of that evidence. It was compromised. And, you started, if you do that in its initial infancy stages, the whole case is blown. That's the bottom line. Whether you got a bunch of buffoons, it doesn't matter who you have on the jury. As long as they have a brain and they can comprehend and perceive what's going on, which they could. Those people were not illiterate. Yeah, they may have been in awe of O.J. Simpson. That doesn't matter. They went through a jury selection process, both sides deemed that they were worthy to serve as jurors, and they came back with that verdict based on all of the evidence that was presented before them. And unfortunately, I think, like you said, there were some mistakes made. The glove was a mistake. That was definitely a mistake. But I just don't see Marcia Clark, and I don't know Marcia Clark. I'm not a fan of anybody. I'm just impartial. I just know that I think she was a good attorney. I think they had a good team.
I'm a lawyer, and she was a horrible attorney. So there you go.
Okay.
That's what makes horse races. California.
Susan, weigh in.
Well, I'm listening to both sides here, and I'm listening to the officer here, and I'm sorry I didn't get your first name, but I can hear in your voice that you're a type of person that, you're not looking at it from an emotional point of view or forming your own opinion. You're looking at it from the facts that you see before them. And your passion and your belief in that is strongly coming across, and I think that it's very authentic. But the other thing that I like to share, though, is that when you're looking at that jury pool, from psychologically point of view, there are certain people that are just more predisposed to believing in, or what I would say, there are psychologically some people that just believe that if you've committed a crime, you're guilty of something. They'll put the gavel down very quickly. And there are others that just will say, it's a little gray area. You need to really prove it to me. You need to show me. You need to tell me.
That's what the law is, by the way. That's the law.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is. It truly is. But what I'm sharing with you is that I know that you're saying that regardless if these people were black, white, pink, or yellow, or if they had their eyes closed, they still would have come to the same verdict if they would have followed those instructions, the jury instructions, and followed the law. And I trust what you say, and I believe what you say is true. But I also believe that the jury, number one, you guys know, it's all about the jury. It's how the jury is interpreting the information individually and then as a group. And
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think that this jury pool was more predisposed to giving someone a second chance or to listening to what they have to say and then not finding, the information that the state was putting on is very credible. And those are the type of people that have a higher level of suspicion, lack of trust, maybe towards police department. I don't know what it is, but that's why they came up with the verdict that they did. And I think it was a cluster of things. It wasn't just one. I think there was numerous things that helped them to come to that verdict.
I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Welcome to our world as jury consultants. It's not a perfect science. Go ahead.
The future cases, like Zimmerman, how did you feel about that, Mr. Kerry Anderson?
Well, I believe that now you talk about being out-lawyered. I think Mr. Zimmerman's lawyers were awesome, and I think the people that put on the case were terrible. I really saw a significant difference in the lawyers and their abilities. And, I knew the way that it was going, that jury, and I don't even know the ethnic makeup of the jury. I just know based on the limited information that I had, and I followed it quite well, that it was going to, I knew it was going to get off. I believe that he was...
He was not going to get off that easy. I'm going to tell you guys, I know stuff from the inside, too, that I was there in that courtroom every single day. And I can't tell you how I know the information, but I know some information that came in. And I'm going to tell you, it was not a slam dunk for the defense. And I've had lunch with Don West because he wanted to understand a little bit more about the work that I do so that he can use me in some future trials. But the bottom line, But the bottom line is that it was not a slam dunk. We had one, especially the Hispanic black individual. She was wavering. You could see it in the courtroom. She became very emotional when she was looking at those photos. She had 8 children already. She was young and impressionable, and she was wavering. And I'm telling you, I said, well, you get behind closed doors, she's going to be your holdout. She's now breaking down. And what she's doing is she's kind of projecting, she's a mother. And she's looking at Zimmerman's parents. How can I let this person go? And she was the one that was holding out over and over again. And I'm telling you, it just was not as easy slam dunk as everybody said. Oh, yeah, the defense was going to win no matter what. Yes, if you were to follow the law, absolutely you would have found Zimmerman not guilty. I would have found him not guilty. But at the same time, that it was every single juror was not on the same path as you think that they were. It took a lot, and what happens is the jurors tend to compromise. They'll get to a certain point, they get worn down, and then one's going to buckle. And I call those sway jurors. And I think that you take one strong person who I knew who it was, and the juror was able to connect with her in such a way that was able to kind of walk through the steps of the evidence, and then she finally compromised, and that's where we came up with a not guilty verdict.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dwayne Cates out of Phoenix. Thank you, Mr. Richard Herman out of New York, Vegas. Thank you, former Sergeant Kerry Anderson. Thank you, Susan Constantine, body language expert. What is your website again, Sue?
SusanConstantine.com.
Check that out. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on a special night. And
thank you so much.
Thanks, an amazing show.
Okay, King.
Yep. Thank you, Jordan. I apologize for not being able to come on. It seemed very interesting to listen to just the 10, 15 minutes that I did, and hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely. Definitely.
No problem.
And
Susan, are you still there?
Susan is off the line.
Okay.
Let's hear OJ with Johnny Cochran back from 95. Take care, everybody. We'll speak to you next time.
Thanks, Jordan.
Okay, Jordan.
Thank you.